When I was at the end of my brokenness, I remember I was just sitting on my couch and I was pregnant and I was in full addiction. I was addicted to pain pills, heroin, and it started way before then with alcohol and everything. I hated myself. I would write letters to my son and I loved him so much, but I didn't feel worthy of him. My addiction had taken over and the doctors were telling me you need to keep using or find, another treatment. And I was just a broken soul. I would lay on my couch and I would just cry for hours. It was the worst time in my life, and I didn't feel like anybody could love me. All I could think is he just deserved a better mom, and that shame is kind of where I lived.
I had the education and the job and the family. We had the vacations and the house and the cars. It was what we in this world would define as successful. The problem is that it was fake and a facade, and spending started getting out of control and debt started mounting. And then you throw on top of that the crash of the housing market, and I found myself in a really bad financial situation. And I started taking money from the organization that I was a CFO at. Long story short, I got caught and I got sentenced to 30 months in federal prison.
Living in brokenness, a lot of it was me dealing with depression and anxiety, just a lot of family issues and a lack of friendships, and just really an ultimate struggle of not being confident in who I was. And so that led to more depression and more anxiety, just being alone, lonely. And in all of that time, I always just wondered what it would be like to be happy and to find true joy.
God had to take me far, far away to be completely alone. I actually gave birth in Georgia and didn't have any family there, and it wasn't by my own choice. God put me there. And for me, I had to be alone with him. And I was so lost and I didn't know how to build that relationship. So for me, he had to just remove me to be close to him.
For me, when I got to that point when I totally and completely surrendered to Christ, it was the lowest point of my life. I had experienced so much loss. I had lost my family, I had lost my money and my possessions, I lost my career, and I was at a place where I had lost my freedom. But what I realized is that I gained everything when I gained Christ. Now, all of the challenges were still there, and I still had to do my prison sentence, and I still had to face the consequences of my decisions. But now I had Christ with me, and he was loving me, and he was growing me, and he was forgiving me, and that made all the difference.
After having friends who I knew were dealing with depression and anxiety themselves and speaking with them and just being vulnerable, that helped tremendously. Just sharing my experiences with them allowed for them to speak truth into my life. There was just a moment when reading the Bible where I had full clarity and just I don't have to be trapped in my own mind. There's freedom to experience within that. And it wasn't all at once. It wasn't after like one moment. It was day to day to day, and even still now developing and trying to work through what real freedom looks like with Jesus.
I went from being an inmate, being a member of children's services in my life, feeling like nothing. Now, I'm executive director of a treatment center. I get to show other women that God can transform their life. I get to look at my son every single night, and he knows Jesus. To me, victory in Jesus is peace. For a long time, I struggled and I didn't have peace, and now I can go to bed and I know that I've done the best thing I can do as long as I follow him. I have joy now, which I never had before. There's a difference between happiness and joy, and I think the world can bring happiness, and God and Jesus just brings joy to my life. It's just this overwhelming feeling. There's nothing too awful you could have ever done in your life to stop him from searching for you. He loves you, and he is fighting. He's fighting for you.
I think for me, what it looks like to live a life free from depression and anxiety and fear is just to be consistent in my walk with Jesus, by waking up in the morning and just making sure I'm in the Word, making sure I'm just taking baby steps and even bigger steps to reading the Word and speaking truth over my life. Also, to surround myself with good community of other believers who can speak truth into my life. I still struggle with anxiety, but allowing myself to work through those issues with a community of believers and with Jesus Christ has enabled me to not be so stuck.
Victory in Jesus for me looks like life, and it looks like life to the fullest, and it looks like life right now. I've lived much of life behind a facade. And as I look around to the world today, and I have to imagine even some of you here right now, you have facades built, and those facades are built strong. What I found, and what I hope that you find, is that when you let Christ in behind those facades, you will see that His love is big enough to forgive. His love is big enough to offer you grace. His love is big enough to offer you healing. His love is big enough to give you life. And that's victory in Jesus.